You're listening to The Ones Who Succeed on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your pods. I'm Campbell Barron, or at Campbell J. Barron on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Welcome to the program. You've heard the saying, the world moves fast, but while living in a time where your iPhone and social media are essentially fighting for our attention, it's safe to say that a fast-moving, never-bored, constantly distracted world is pretty much normalized at this point. Like, think about it. When was the last time you took a second, looked around, no Twitter timeline, no TikTok feed, and just took the world in? Yeah, I can't remember the last time I lived in the moment either. But what if I told you that the best, most effective way to solve this problem and preserve memories and capture moments takes place on the very same platform that is constantly fighting for our attention? What if this magical memory capturing solution was in the form of a mobile application? An app that people could download for free and create daily video diaries featuring 1-second clips from their life stitched together as days turn into months and months turn into years. Well, one day, someone by the name of Cesar Kuriyama had that exact same idea. He built the now popular mobile app 1 Second Every Day, which, like mentioned above, enables users to capture 1 second of their daily life from their smartphone every day, stitching it together to make a memory montage of your life. A memory montage that essentially becomes more valuable as you continue to use the product. As a fan of the app, I was really keen to have Cesar on the program. He's based in Brooklyn, New York, where he joins me via Zoom. This is The Ones Who Succeed. I'm Campbell Barron. I hope you're having a great day today. Take a look around you. Enjoy the moment. My conversation with Cesar Kuriyama starts now. Well, Cesar, I really appreciate you taking the time to come on the program. Great to get to talk to you.
Yeah, likewise, man.
So I'm a fan of the product. I heard about it through TED Radio Hour a while ago and thought it was really cool. I've been really into video for a while, really into podcasts for a while, but it is a little labor intensive to capture 1 second of your day and bring it into a Final Cut timeline. So I thought it was really cool that there's an app for that. And so we'll get into all of that in a sec. But before we kind of get into that and what you're doing with 1 second every day, what were you doing leading up to 1 second every day? What did your life look like at that point?
Yeah, I have a weird trajectory because I was a math and science nerd growing up. Those were my best subjects. And I got into doing my own little animated short films in high school, like around sophomore and junior year. I mean, it was something I was doing in my spare time for fun. Mm-hmm. And so I decided to go and actually major in visual effects and animation. And what I didn't realize at the time was that like storytelling was the thing that really was at the core of why I was making animated. It wasn't animation itself. It was like storytelling that I was really into. So I ended up in art school. I got a pretty all-around education. And after that, I worked in advertising, doing visual effects and animation. But I kind of got burnt out pretty quickly with the work I was doing, and it wasn't very creatively fulfilling. So I started having my own side hustles of like side projects that I was working on to kind of scratch my creative itch. One of them ended up being a music video I directed that did really well. Wired covered it, got like a couple of million views. And I thought, oh, like it gave me the confidence to think that I could make a living with my own ideas and not like the problem with like animation that I didn't think about when I went to art school to study it was that it was very much something where you end up working on other people's ideas. All that led up to eventually kind of making a plan to quit my job. And that's a whole other story that led to 1 second every day. But yeah, visual effects and animation is kind of like where I got started.
So how does a filmmaker and someone who works in advertising, how do you go about building an app? How did you get there?
What's cool, man? My 1 second every day app has 9 years essentially of moments logged in. So every day I check in on a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago. And it's funny because I shared this with my team today. Today's June 16th. June 16th, 2012 is a moment of me under a tree at the campus that I went to art school in Pratt Institute in Brooklyn, reading a book called App Empire. I had zero concept of like how one goes about making an app. I knew I wanted to make an app for 1 second every day, but I had no idea how to execute on. And the first thing I actually ever did was just Google, how do I make an app, which led me into some paths of the kinds of programming languages I would need to learn, blah, blah, blah. Like, it seemed pretty obvious that like, all right, if I want to make this anytime soon, I'm going to have somebody else do the coding. I knew what I wanted. I just couldn't like execute it on my own. But you know,
Hmm.
even just the process of like putting it up on the app store and stuff like that, like I had to learn by basically like blog posts,
Yeah.
Twitter, buying coffees, and that book App Empire at least got my. It gave me I had disagreed with a lot of that book actually, but it gave me a bird's eye view of like the whole
Hmm.
process.
After your TED Talk, towards the end of your TED Talk, which has got a couple 100,000 views, I actually rewatched it now just to refresh myself. You encouraged the viewers to try it themselves. You said it'd be a fun project. It'd be an interesting project if they just, use their smartphone. And this is 2012, so I think the idea was a little bit weirder back then than it is now,
Totally.
right? Snapchat wasn't really popular at that point, so there was Facebook and Twitter. But at the end of the TED Talk, it didn't seem clear that you had an app built. It kind of just seemed clear that you did this project with yourself and thought it'd be very interesting to share. So what did you do to physically get the app built from that TED Talk to launch? I'm curious to hear that part.
Yeah, I mean, I quit my job. I took a year off from work. Quitting my job was inspired by a TED Talk from 2008 that I saw, where it was called The Power of Time Off, and that convinced me to quit my job. And that year off ended with me giving a TED Talk at TED 2012.
It's a
And
circle.
at that point, yeah, I know, it's like a beautiful circle. I hear
Yeah.
that all the time. So I went back to work in advertising for like a day because I had run out of money. I used all my savings to take that year off. And luckily, I just kind of like figured out a way to basically I quit again. And then I got some freelance work just to figure out how to make, like, I was determined to try to figure out how to make an app for this idea that, after I gave the TED Talk, the first thing that, everybody said to me, was like, I want to do this too. But it's a relatively difficult thing for most people to do, easy for me to do because my background's in video and editing and all that is really easy for me to do. But I thought, well, how does somebody do this as easily as they use Instagram is kind of what I had in my head. And, dragging 365 videos together into a iMovie timeline was not exactly it's a considerable amount of friction.
It's not user friendly, that's for sure.
So I knew what I wanted, and then I just started having meetings with anybody who would listen. Luckily, the TED Talk helped in the sense that, like, sending a cold email that said, "Hey, I just spoke at TED 2012 about this idea, trying to figure out how to turn it into an app." Mm-hmm. Gave me meetings. So that was a huge way to get meetings. And some of them were with prominent people that I was like, they'll say no, but whatever. Or they'll never reply. But next thing I know, I'm in a room with them. So
yeah. And what were you doing in these meetings? What was the purpose of these meetings?
The idea, basically, I would tell them a little bit of like, at that point, I had been recording a second of every day for, a little bit over a year. So it was like relatively still an embryonic thing. And I was basically telling them, listen, I've been doing this for a little bit over a year now. It's having a really positive impact on my day-to-day life. This is the journal that I've always wanted to keep my entire life. So and I wasn't thinking like, what's the market size or anything like that. I went to art school. So like, I still at that time saw it more as like more closer to an art project than something like a business. I didn't think of it as a business at the time. I just thought it could help a lot of people.
Yeah. So you wanted to build this app. You wanted to build this app so other people could share 1 second of their day. There was no like, we're going to raise venture capital funding and make this big.
I was alien to all that. I had no idea what any of that meant.
And you started a Kickstarter to get off the ground.
Yeah. There are a couple of things that led to that. And one of them was, frankly, my ignorance of not understanding the venture. Like, I didn't know a single entrepreneur. I didn't know anybody who could tell me about venture capital, which ended up being a good thing. But the idea that somebody would just give you like, quote unquote, like couple of $100,000 for on paper saying they own 20% of your company for something that doesn't even exist yet is to this day insane to me. But the kind of 3 steps were, how do I make an app? Okay, I need people who can do this. How do I hire those people? I start having meetings with those people. And all of it led to like, well, it's going to cost you minimum $100,000, if not more, because this is a very difficult thing to build. We may get stuck and we're just going to keep charging $100 an hour until we figure it out. So there's just like, well, I don't have $100,000. So once I got to that point, I had asked Tim Ferriss at a book signing thing that he did in New York when he was launching the 4 Hour Body. Essentially, I spent like 3 hours waiting for the crowds to clear around him, and I finally walked up to him because he was about to leave, and I just I concised my sentence as fast as possible, something to the effect of, I just gave a TED talk about this idea. I want to build it into an app. I have no idea what to do. Like and he said, don't raise money. Just find a way to build a prototype without giving any equity away.
Not bad advice.
Yeah, I mean, every night I was going to like something in the city to like meet people, especially like developer meetups, entrepreneurial things. I was like consuming as much as I could to learn about everything I could soak up in regards to entrepreneurship, because I was alien to it. And the stories that I would hear about people being really pissed that they raised money because they had all this like all these expectations and they were forced to do things that they didn't want to do. A lot of it just sounded like not what I wanted 1 second every day to be. 1 second every day at the time for me was, I want to build this app that allows people to do this. I want to put it on the App Store, and then I'm going to go direct another music video. Like it was literally just a
project. It was a project.
Yeah. I want to put the thing on the App Store that lets people do this, and then I'm going to go on with my life. That was the idea. It wasn't a business. It was like a product that I could put for sale and then leave it and make a passive income on it while I do other things. So yeah, the Kickstarter essentially came from a lot of these restrictions and finally finding other developers that were interested in building it more than they were interested in making profiteering off of it. And they said, we want to be the guys who made this. So we're going to lowball you for like, $25,000. Like, we'll build the app and flat fee, no matter how long it takes us. And I was like, well, I could at least imagine getting $25,000. Like, I couldn't do that for $100,000. But more importantly, those guys just actually had a passion behind wanting to make it and make it as good as possible. So everybody else was just like, yeah, I don't know, you pay us, we'll code it, Right. That went a long way.
And so how much did you raise in regards to the Kickstarter? How much did you raise from it?
I was looking for $20K, which is exactly what I like. I gave those guys a $5K in my bank account, and then the rest I was like, I'll get that through Kickstarter. So I was trying to get 20. I ended up getting $56,281.
Wow, look at that, an exact number.
Yeah, and that came from 12,281 backers. That was the backer number that I remember perfectly. And the reason that actually ended up being so quote unquote low, because again, I didn't think of it as a business or anything, and I didn't realize the cost on the other side of actually building the thing. Like, because I was so new to all this, like I like naively thought we could finish it, put it on the App Store, and I could move on with my life. I didn't think about updates and iOS updates and new iPhones and bugs and all the stuff that came on the other side, where we would need money going forward in perpetuity. And so I charged $1 for the app. So like the majority, like 8,000 of those backers were people who gave $1, which is great. But in retrospect, maybe I could have made it 2 or 3, and we would have had a way longer runway on the other side.
Yeah, I mean, so now 1 second every day is no longer a project. It's a legitimate company. It seems like your focus for the app was at the beginning, right? The App Store in 2012 was very different than it is now. A lot more paid apps, because that was SaaS wasn't really as popular as it is now. The subscription boom hadn't really taken place. So you've definitely pivoted, and it's a legitimate company now. How big is the team in 2020?
20.
20 people.
Yeah, we're a team of 20, and we've been very lucky to scale in a way where we've always, we hire when we can afford it.
So you bootstrapped it. Did you raise?
We bootstrapped this entire time up until about a year ago. We raised capital for the first time, but we did it with non-traditional venture money. We were trying to essentially hire ahead of our revenue, because we were starting to put the pieces together to build the social stuff that we've been wanting to build for a while. So we hired like 4 or 5 engineers essentially with the money we raised, so that we could start building right away. We raised with NDVC, which is, I would say, the most prominent like traditional venture capital fund out there.
When you say non-traditional, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of terms being thrown around. Alt VC is a very common one, but the idea is that like, there are a lot of companies that probably don't make sense. I mean, I would argue majority of companies don't fit into the model of venture capital because a venture capitally funded company is trying to scale very fast, very quick, trying to scale very big, very quickly, and within, X amount of time, say anywhere between 3 to 7 years or whatever, sell the company to a bigger company or IPO, right? Like those are essentially the investors get their money back through those two means, essentially. And so, there's a lot of good companies out that have existed throughout all these many years that died simply because turns out let's just say somebody builds something that's like 1 million people really love it and they're willing to pay for it. But that's not enough for them to raise another round, and therefore they're gone, or they have to sell to another company for whatever reason. And so, I think if every company is just trying to sell to Facebook, Microsoft, Amazon, you name it, or IPO and become this publicly traded company, eventually you end up right back into incentives within the company that aren't necessarily good for customers. They're good for investors, but they're not necessarily what's good for the people who use the product. So it's not always the case, but more often than not, there's giant gap essentially in the market of, hey, we should have plenty of these companies that, there's a lot of these companies should exist and they should just be profitable and charge money for it and whatever. And if they don't become something that 1 billion people use, that's okay. Those companies deserve to exist just as much as the big ones. So, and there's, you just have to get your capital by different means and different terms, essentially.
Right. So you pushed away the grow at all costs, Silicon Valley mantra. And then at some point you relaunched the app. You made the decision to switch the model from a paid model to a free model. And I remember following you on Twitter at this time, and the app was just exploding. It was a very successful relaunch. Talk about that. What was the motivation to do that?
So the beauty of charging for an app is that you're profitable from day one, which is what, we actually made it free the first day we launched back in 2013 for 24 hours. So our backers could get the app easily, blah, 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 and they could give it to their loved ones, so on and so forth. Also, Apple didn't make it easy for us to deliver, get promo codes or anything like that. So those first couple of years, those first 2 years, it was just I just wanted it to pay for itself. That would have made me happy. But it slowly took over my life in a way that it kind of snuck up on me. And one day I just woke up and realized, oh yeah, this is my entire life and I'm doing it all by myself. And it's slowly, I can't do everything myself anymore. And we were in this movie Chef. Things kept happening in a way that I could not control. And I realized, oh yeah, this is a company. So at the time I was charging $1 for the app. And I thought, well, what if I charge $2? This is at the point at which I decided I need to turn this into a real company. So I switched it to $2, but the downloads stayed the same. So I was like, oh, well then, damn, I'm making twice more money now. Yeah, I can hire somebody. And so I kept kind of dialing where, we needed a CTO. So, eventually I got it up to $5 and the downloads, we were getting a little bit less downloads, but we were getting $5.
I think I paid for it at $5. I was going to say $2 seemed a lot less expensive than when I bought it.
At the time, $5 was pretty expensive for us to pay $5. I think we had about a 20% decrease in downloads, but we had 5 times more revenue. And that allowed us to actually hire out a team, which allowed us to build features and launch things and, scale in a way that I couldn't do if I was just me alone charging $1. And so we knew that the long-term strategy was never to keep the app paid. We knew at some point we needed to switch to a recurring revenue stream. The seas were shifting way before we jumped in terms of recurring revenue. It was just the only way to make a lot of these things sustainable,
Coming up, I continue my conversation with 1 Second Everyday founder, Cesar Kuriyama. That's all ahead. Stay with us. This is The Ones Who Succeed. I'm Campbell Barron. We'll be right back after a brief word from our sponsor. This episode of The Ones Who Succeed is brought to you by Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning platform with thousands of classes in business, marketing, technology, design, and more. You can take classes in social media marketing, video editing, entrepreneurship, you name it, they've got it. So whether you're trying to deepen your professional skill set, start a side hustle, or just explore a new passion, Skillshare is there to keep you learning and thriving. So, ladies and gentlemen, here is the call to action. Skillshare is offering the Want to Succeed listeners 2 months of unlimited access to thousands of classes, all for free. To sign up, go to Skillshare.com/succeed. Again, that's Skillshare.com/succeed. That link is how they know the ones who succeed sent you to start your first 2 months now. You can find that link in the description of this podcast, and it would be awesome if you can support our show by supporting our sponsors. So one last time, visit Skillshare.com/succeed to start your first 2 months of Skillshare Premium today. And thanks to Skillshare for sponsoring the show. This is the Ones Who Succeed. I'm Campbell Barron. Welcome back to the program. I hope you're having a great day today. And I'm about halfway through my conversation with Cesar Kuriyama. He's the founder of 1 Second Every Day. So we're going to jump right back into that conversation. Do you think you would be able to build 1 Second Every Day and have it turn out as a success in 2020? Let's say you did the TED Talk in 2019, and then you get it together and launch in 2020. Because the reason I ask this question is the landscape of the mobile app store, like you think back to 2012, that was just like a good time to be in mobile apps. I remember, and I've mentioned this many times on the podcast, but the types of apps I was downloading were like swipe and the screen changes color, or like a beer, or an app where you can drink beer sideways. Like some stupid 100%. Things, right? And so that's a part of the reason I think kind of Instagram and Snapchat and a lot of these apps that were started around this era did so well is just it just wasn't as competitive.
Yeah, 100%. I remember the thing that finally got me to jailbreak my phone was because there was somebody built like a lightsaber sound thing when you swiped your phone. It goes zoom, zoom, and I was like, "Well, all right, I'm jailbreaking my phone." And
I don't do people jailbreak phones anymore? Oh my god, I don't remember. No, I haven't heard that in a long time. But in terms of the 1 Second Every Day, do you think it would have worked in 2020?
Yeah, so hindsight's always interesting, right? But at the time when we were launching 1 Second Every Day, I felt like we were super late. Like it was too late to launch 1 Second Every Day at the time. Yeah.
Oh my god.
There were all these other apps. So, for example, this is how I saw things at the time. Mm-hmm. There was an app called Social Cam that people were telling me about.
That was Michael Seibel he runs YC now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I thought, like they were moving quickly and blah, blah, blah. And, and it's just like Vine came out at the same time as us. Mm-hmm. Vine and 1 Second Every Day launched almost, relatively around the same time. Snapchat also launched around relatively the same time. There's like a plethora of apps that for me were like, well, all right, like it's too late. They already did the video thing with the whatever, but like our secret sauce was different in that like we weren't making a social network, we were making a private video diary journal thing. So I did think we were built like we were carving out our own thing that I didn't see in the App Store. And so cut to now, to answer your question, even though I felt I was late back then, I would gather that like whatever exists in 10 years, people think today was like, man, remember back then when this was all like, it's possible. We don't know. Or we'll be saying that about VR stuff that like, it's like, God, like only 1 million people were using VR back then. Now it's like, 100 million people. So who knows? Everything's interesting in retrospect. But I do think that today we could, if we were to launch today, we could succeed because I think that a lot of what makes us popular today is still relatively either niche or
it's not time sensitive.
Yeah, I mean we're a diary, and a lot of people. There's a lot of interesting use cases that keep popping up. So, for example, 2 years ago, there was the first like 1 Second Every Day video of a puppy growing up that blew up on the internet, and it got like 20 million views. So I think if we were to launch today, I don't know if we don't have a lot of clear competitors yet, or ones that are like cloned. I mean, there's been a lot of clones over the years, but all of them luckily have been terrible, and we've never been threatened by them. But so who knows? I think maybe the landscape will change in the next couple of years. But I do think we would do well if we launched today.
I mean, the irony and kind of what you just said is you mentioned a few apps that launched around the same time: Social Cam, Vine, Snapchat, one of which is still around today. And Social Cam and Vine both were venture funded. And so it's really not about the press. It's not about the buzz.
Yeah, Vine is such an interesting example. Or it's like talk about millions and millions of devoted fans to that app,
Yeah.
and bought by Twitter
Totally
and
botched.
eventually shut down. And it's
Yeah.
like there's a lot of what we do with 1 second every day that like we know doesn't fit into like traditional massive scale models, and some of
Hmm.
the stuff we're building now like has the potential to be huge, but we don't want to bet the farm on it. Like we come at it from a place of like, even if some of the stuff we're building doesn't take off, like it's okay because the core product is still a sustainable part of this. It's sustainable so that somebody who started using 1 second every day, 7 years ago, gets to use it for another 30 years without
Hmm.
eventually getting an email from us saying that we couldn't raise another round and so we're shutting it down and your memories download your memories now because they're
Yeah.
going to disappear. We
Yeah,
don't ever want to
exactly.
send that email.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's true. Do you think you'll ever raise another round of financing?
We certainly approached this round of financing as the only round of financing.
I feel like
Well,
most people do that though.
well,
And
with venture
then,
capital, you're on
yeah.
the hook to raise your next round
I
until
mean
you
that the
can't raise
clock is
anymore.
ticking, right? Until
Yeah, you have
an exit
you
or an
bought yourself
IPO.
18 months
Yeah.
essentially, and so yeah, with us, the idea is that hopefully what we're building will allow us to scale sustainably with our own profits coming in.
Hmm. Yeah.
If that doesn't come to pass, and there are many reasons why that doesn't come to pass that we've plotted out are potentially plausible or likely, we would probably start with a couple of other non-traditional venture capital things that are on the table. That 3 years ago, venture capital is basically 3 4 years ago, venture capital is basically the way you raise money. Period. And today there's like dozens and dozens and dozens of ways to raise capital that don't involve the traditional venture track. So we would probably try that first. And then at the same time, if, for example, what we're building takes off in a way that we can't, like, it's just like, our servers are going bananas and whatever, we've generated enough relationships with like venture capitalists that we trust that we could go that route. But,
Hmm.
it all depends.
Is this a lifestyle business, Caesar?
I don't see it as a lifestyle business. I would say that somebody who's in the venture capital track would probably see it as a lifestyle business. So there's this gray area in between of, for example, with us, where we have huge ambitions, but we want to get to the finish line in a different way than the usual way.
Hmm.
So I would say a lifestyle business is a little bit more akin to like we have X many customers, we're generating enough money to scale, by hiring a couple of people every couple of months,
Hmm.
business as usual. We have a couple of things in the back. Like I would say that fits into a more lifestyle businessy definition.
Yeah.
Whereas we're building something that potentially millions and millions of people potentially will want and use and will scale quickly if we let it scale quickly. It might not, but it's certainly being built with that intention. So
Yeah.
I would say that a traditional lifestyle business isn't trying to do that. I would say,
Hmm.
they're just trying to like have a pretty good quality of life and make sure that everybody in the company is well taken care of and it's profitable and sustainable. We want all that with the ambitions of venture scale on top.
Right.
So it's a little bit different.
So it's a mix. There's a balance. So you've been working on this for quite a while, right? 2012, it's 2020. I had Michael Mignano on the program who built Anchor, and he launched that in 2016. That's not that long ago. It got acquired by Spotify 3 years later, which is extraordinary fast for venture scale. But
Yeah.
you've been kind of working on this for a long time, and you've been pretty focused on it, and you've built your team, and you have 20 people. Like I think I don't think one or the other is a better way of doing things. But do you ever kind of just want to stop and kind of work on something else? Do you have ideas for apps? Do you think you'll be a serial entrepreneur?
I have no shortage of ideas. I mean, I write them all down every day. The thing about me is that I don't necessarily have only entrepreneurial ideas. Some of them are like
Hmm.
I already know what my next company would be if I was to start one tomorrow.
Can you tell me?
Uh, it's the short version is that I think that the entire idea it's a Yelp. It's my version of what I wish Yelp was. In the same way that 1 second every day is the way that I wish I could journal.
Yeah.
Uh,
So what's your idea of
I,
what Yelp was? That sounds interesting.
I'm not giving it away,
Okay.
but
Okay. Fine. Fair enough. Fair enough.
but it's my version of a Yelp killer in that I
Okay.
think it solves things that are good for the restaurant. It solves things that are good for people like me who are foodies. It solves things for discovery,
Right.
and it makes things more social.
So you have
And
ideas.
it's certainly not a company that can exist in this in a pandemic. I'll say that.
Yes.
So I have plenty of time to get to it. But yeah, no shortage of ideas, and some of them again, I have entrepreneurial ideas. I have short film ideas. I
Hmm.
have like a lot of artistic ideas that have nothing even to do with video or with building another company.
Hmm.
So yeah, I do think at some point I'll want to, maybe, leave the CEO to another person or something like that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
as of right this second, I'm like, couldn't be more passionate about like the social stuff we're building. There's a lot that's still missing from this app that I want there to exist that I'm like extremely passionate about building into the app. And
Yeah.
I don't know, that goal line changes all the time.
Yeah. So you're not
So
ready to walk away.
oh no. One way or the other, I need to see through the thing that I have in my head that I want to.
Hmm.
The version of social media that I think should exist that doesn't exist yet. It'll be a while.
Yeah, and it's good for the company. What entrepreneurs, what investors, technology folks, what types of people, and specifically, who do you admire in this space? Seems like you have a unique take on tech, and doesn't seem like you're the type of guy to look up to Mark Zuckerberg.
No. Yeah, it's an interesting question. I'm all over the place with that. I can be anywhere on the scale, all the way from like, DHH and Jason Fried, who
Yeah, yeah.
just, launched,
Hey.
a new email service, Hey, and
Hmm.
watching their journey with their company, with Basecamp and with remote work. We're a entirely remote company
Were
since
you
day
before the
one,
panda? Oh,
essentially.
since day one. Wow, you're
Yeah.
ahead of the trend.
Yeah, we've always had, adjusted as we've scaled to make
Hmm.
things work remotely. There are two books, Remote and Rework. They incepted me with a lot of ideas that made a lot of sense for me. So, for example, our company runs through this kind of thing that I believe they coined. They may not have coined it, but I got it from them, which ROWE, like ROWE, which is a result-oriented work environment, which is like the kind of thing that makes a remote company kind of function. And I think a lot of the things that I see in my bubble with like people being forced into remote work right now is that they're doing remote work in a traditional like 9 to 5 way that doesn't quite, it's apples and oranges a bit when you're working remotely. And that like
Hmm.
we want somebody in our company to go and see their son's soccer match without having to ask for permission because it's in the middle of like quote unquote the work day. Like we everybody has a role in the company. Everybody has something that they're responsible for. And if they're getting their job done, like we're not going to count how many hours you've sat in front of your computer, like the result is the same when you're doing your job and you're doing it
Yeah.
well. But at the same time, there's a lot of other more traditional, VC. So Hunter Walk is one of our angel investors, and I find Hunter's sensibilities to be very aligned with like doing the right thing, doing what's good for humanity. Like I think there are venture capitalists that say they want to do social impact or whatever, but like, do they? Like,
Hmm.
I don't know. I'm in VC land, it's just like any other place. Like there are people looking for different incentives and they have different things in mind. So anybody who falls into that bucket of like genuinely trying to do the right thing, I tend to like them.
You have a very interesting take on Silicon Valley, and definitely a very interesting take on just app building in general, running a technology company. I would say it's the grow at all costs, quick exit seems to be the more popular take, especially in Silicon Valley. But what are your thoughts on, well, crazy valuations pre-product, pre-revenue?
There's a lot of threads to pull on there. For the record, I'm not anti venture capital. I just think that a lot of companies don't fit the model very well.
Yeah, no,
I
I
actually
got
think
that.
venture capital is like a fine option for tons of. So the other company, the Yelp killer I have in mind is a totally venture capital
Yeah.
like company. Like
Yeah, you
I
have
would
it,
super
you're
seek
just
out.
saying you're just saying you have to know your company and do what's best
Right.
for the product you're building.
Right. And so I think with regards to valuations and stuff like that, I totally get it. Psychologically, I totally understand that. So, for example, right, like Clubhouse just raised
Right.
$10 million at a $100 million valuation from Andreessen
Yeah,
Horowitz.
I was thinking about that when I said that. When I asked the
Yeah,
question.
I totally get why a lot of venture capitalists would compete to be in the round.
Mhm.
And that kind of competition makes it so that somebody's like, well, I'll give you one more $1 million than the other guy. And the other guy will be
Right.
like, I'll give you one until eventually
Just
Andreessen.
drives the price up like crazy.
Right, exactly. And so it just, I get it. It makes sense. The market dynamics just make these things play themselves out, right? And so like on the surface, it's like, oh, $10 million pre-launch, pre-whatever. Like, are you kidding me? $100 million valuation. But below the surface, it's like they see that this could be huge, clear venture scale thing in a social space. And of course, some of this stuff always also comes from who is the person, right? And Paul Davidson has, obviously is not like a guy who just came out of thin air and whatever. He had the relationships. So it's usually when some of these things get these crazy valuations, like there's a lot of layers to it. There's a lot of reasons why that ends up happening. In this case, it's like the perfect storm. It's like everybody wants in. All the people using it are venture capitalists who want in. The market is potentially literally as big as Facebook, right? Like it all makes sense to me. So I wouldn't sit back and be like, duh, blah, 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 blah. Like it totally, sometimes it doesn't make sense. Sometimes I see a crazy valuation, a crazy amount of money, and I see a tiny market where I'm like, or either something else, like a tiny market or something that doesn't quite fit in. And that's when I get a little bit like, I get a little bit annoyed.
Yeah.
At the same time, there's just so much money. These funds there's so many people now who are in the game that they have to spend the money somewhere.
Yeah, they got.
So that also drives up competition.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't have a strong opinion. Maybe the bubble will burst eventually because most VC funds will not be bringing in strong returns, and of course, those things take many, many years to play themselves out.
Yeah, I mean, there's an effect, right? You place an investment. There's a heavy delay until you realize whether you're good or not. And what's one of your favorite apps at this time, other than 1 second every day in 2020?
I'll tell you what, the thing that's truly saved my quarantine, being that I'm in day 97 today of my self-quarantine with my parents, is it's an app called Future. It is a virtual personal trainer. It's expensive, but it's compared to when you price it up against what it would cost you to have a personal trainer in real life, it's like 1/10 the price. And basically it's this one-on-one relationship I have with like videos and everything where like me and this personal trainer, actually, he knows he's taking my progress into account. And I mean, I as somebody who's been basically was like barely moving, because I was the first all of March, I basically barely moved. I've been getting in shape in quarantine thanks to this. Something that works for me is accountability. And so having somebody that I'm going back and forth with.
Yeah, a real person.
Yeah, I've not missed a day in 2.5 months since I started. And the experience has been fantastic. And it's definitely an expensive thing, but matched up to what it costs to even have just like a gym membership in a city, it's actually pretty much the same. So.
And my last question for you, Cesar, what keeps you up at night?
It varies. Could be relationship stuff, could be the state of the world stuff. Certainly sometimes it's company stuff if we're trying to figure something out. I'm very obsessive, for better or worse. So when something consumes me, it's all I think about. It's good and bad. And so it depends on the evening.
Well, Cesar, I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. Great to get to talk to you.
Yeah, man. Dude, it was a pleasure. Thanks again for reaching out.
That's Cesar Kuriyama, one of the ones who succeed. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, it would be amazing if you could leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps us out. Or tell a friend. That also helps new listeners discover the show. I really appreciate it. If you want to see clips from the show and stay up to date with what I'm working on, you could follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Campbell J. Barron. And my YouTube channel is my name, Campbell Barron. You've made it to the end of the show. Thanks for listening. I'm your host, Campbell Barron, and I'll be back in no time.